Hey,
Hello,
welcome to Kitchen Table Conversations. I'm Chessie.
and I'm Andre.
We're here with Multicultural Family Hub, and we are starting a new series. So if
Yes.
this is your first time here with us, we just finished a moving series because we moved from Northern California, tiny town of 178, maybe 179, I recall, to Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah.
So we are here in Savannah, Georgia, now with you, and we are starting in a new series on
Anxiety.
thanks.
It's hard to make that one sound exciting.
Specifically,
Anxiety.
way better.
Yeah, you got to put like a little bit of.
A little zhuzh on it.
Yeah.
Specifically parental anxiety.
Yes. Yeah.
And we've been running into that a lot.
hmm
Some of our own, I would say some of my own, maybe not so much from faith. Some of my own, but also other people's stories about
Yeah.
what school you need to go to,
When you.
where you need to be living, the activities you should be doing,
hmm
and then the stories that people are telling you having an effect.
Mm-hmm. hmm
So,
Yeah, and so I think for this, starting off this series, we're going to be touching on each one is going to focus on a different theme or a different area of our parenting life that, at least for us, we think brings the most anxiety to parents. But for this first episode, this one's going to focus on the concept or the topic of school.
yep.
Yes. And now you
And
might be thinking, well, it's summer. Why would you guys focus on this? But most parents will tell you when it comes to thoughts around school or specifically anxiety around school for your kids, it starts now. It starts in July. Because
I think
yeah,
I think it starts when your kids are born, depending
yeah.
on where
That's a
you
good point.
live, right? Like
Yeah.
we didn't have this situation when our kids were young
Mhm.
because we had family support. I chose a role that was more flexible, so I did a lot of
There
staying
was
home
COVID.
and taking care of kids. There was COVID. There was a lot, right? Multiple factors. But a lot of people, when you have kids, you are
Mhm.
moving to a specific, you're thinking about where you're going to live
Mhm.
because that will determine the school that you go to. And you are getting into on daycare lists super early.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of people prenatally, like pregnant women, will put their children on a list, before they have them because
Mhm.
it can be it can be so anxiety
Yeah.
ridden to find the right spot for
Yeah.
your child.
Or so, and I know I've had friends or people, like they look and they go, "Oh, so and so is going to be 5 in next year, 2 years. We got to move now.
Right.
We got, so that you're already wherever it is the place that you're told you're supposed to be, or you believe you're supposed to be, or you think you're supposed to be. So I mean, it impacts major life decisions like where do you live? Where do you not live? What jobs do you take? How far do you commute? All of that are the results of what we think or what we are experiencing, what we're being told at the root cause of it is this anxiousness, this overculture anxiousness around not school, impact it has, what role it plays, how does it shape your kid's future. So we want to kind of dive into that.
Yeah, it's been interesting moving to a new city too, because like every place has its own story around education and around schooling. So we did a lot of Facebook marketplacing in the past like few weeks
Oh
to get
man,
furniture.
you want to learn a place? Yeah,
Yeah,
just do some
Facebook
Facebook.
marketplace and be like,
You'll go to
there's a couch. Everybody get in the truck and go.
You're like, I didn't even know this alley existed, and I don't want to be here.
Um, but on one of our Facebook Marketplace adventures, a lot of people there's a lot of like for sale signs where you're picking up
Yeah.
Facebook Marketplace furniture because they're getting rid of stuff. It's like, common. And one of them we were picking up a dog crate, I
hmm
think. Um, and they were selling their house because they had moved out to the specific part of town that was supposed to be good schools, but that wasn't cutting it for them. So now they were moving across town for a better school. But it like, you pick up your lives multiple times based
Yeah.
on the stories or the reality.
Or
And the story being to where we are now, that if you are from a certain demographic, like you have to send your kids to a private school. That is the best education.
that's standard practice.
Right.
Yeah.
Is if you are going to go, if you are going to have a good school, then you send them, like, what private school are they going to?
And I kind of want to tease this out. We are specifically talking about like a school, like a structured school building. We're not talking about education because in our, our view of education, that encompasses things that are happen way outside of the parameters of any school building.
Right.
So we're for this context, we're talking about a school, a place where your child is going, every day or multiple days a week for some kind of instruction on academics and things like that.
And I
So
also
yeah.
think school, because we homeschooled for
Mm.
the past 2.5 years. That is also a form of school, whether you're choosing to keep your kids home
Yeah.
or send them out, and all the stories around all those specific ways of being.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so another thing that came up for me in our Facebook marketplace that took us to all these different parts of, Greater Savannah, meaning downtown, all the way out to different islands, was it was really interesting and people were very open, especially I think because when you're new and you're asking questions, people want to share their stories with you. And one of the themes that kept coming up is especially families that were like kind of around our age, um, so families that were right around our age, obviously, very active, moving and things like that, is they would say like, hey, this area I'm in, it doesn't have the things I love. It doesn't have the classes I want to take. It doesn't have any of the activities, things. And when I say I mean I, the adult. I not the parent I, but like Andre and Jesse. It doesn't have any of that. And in fact, I'm actually really bored out here, but it's supposed to have a good school. And that was fascinating because I
Yeah.
started to think about the impact when you don't have access, you as the individual, to the things that bring you joy, that keep you healthy, that keep you growing, keep you learning. We know that has a massive impact on your partnership.
Yeah.
And we also know that has a massive impact on your on your child because all the weight of things being good then is kind of put the emotional load that is put on that child of like I'm making this sacrifice. All of this sacrifice is so that you will have a good school. So I'm not exercising. I'm not going out and engaging in social activities that make me joyful. I'm not learning. I'm not growing.
If you guys are watching this on YouTube, we're not going to edit it out, but our puppy is going bananas.
Because the mailman is delivering mail in a city.
How dare you? And so we are still figuring out the puppy situation. She's kind of bananas today. So anyway,
Savage beast. So that was something that was interesting to me because I don't think many couples could like saw the connection of when you remove all those things that are very healthy for you as an individual, could see the connection to how that could lead to some negative things within your relationship, but also within your relationship with kids. So these were great conversations we were having. And then we kind of said, well, okay, what is it then that drives us to make these decisions? What is it about school, or what is it about this school decision that causes so much anxiety that we make massive life decisions based on this one element of our larger parenting experience?
yeah.
Yeah. And what we discovered was oftentimes we're going to separate these two things out. So I guess we talk about anxiety, at least the way that we look at it is like from this holistic view of like, you know, if you're having a human experience, you are going to experience anxiety. Every human being does. And, you want to look back on it, it has a role. It has a role in our survival. It has wisdom in it. A lot of times it can keep us out of really potentially dangerous or toxic situations. However, that when we use that in response,
Did you pause it?
well,
Okay. We're just gonna go save our pillows because holy moly. That's how it goes some days. We have adoptions, as you can see. They are legitimately the best, worst dogs. We're gonna take a break and see if we can settle this.
Sure. You might be listening this. You might be tuning in after the commercial break as I caught our savage wing dog trying to destroy
All the
an
furniture.
innocent pillow. Um,
I've seen her do terrible things with a pillow.
so yeah, so for the overculture, at least at this point in time period, there's a lot of emphasis on getting rid of anxiety, like not having it, or either getting rid of it or eliminating it. And all of that kind of focuses on essentially like trying to carve away this thing that if you are a human being, you are going to experience at some point in your life. And depending on when you experience it and depending on the reason you're experiencing it, it could be a very beneficial and a very wise thing. Like in a response to an event that either is happening in real time, or there's a lot of signs that, hey, something's not right here, and your body and your mind's like, you should be anxious about this. This doesn't feel safe, or that there's some warning signs here that nobody's saying, but I'm feeling. We're not talking about that. What we are talking about is the anxiety that comes up based on the stories that something may occur. So, not a response to something that is happening or that has happened, but we're talking about the anxiety of like the story when people say, if you do that, that might happen, or if your kid goes there, that might happen, or that's not a good place. Or the flip side of this is like, these are the good places, and if you go there, everything will be fine. All of those are the stories that we want to focus on for this episode. And those are the stories that talking to people that are in our current position, talking to people that work inside of schools, talking to people that work outside schools, these are the stories that circulate nonstop, that create a culture of anxious parents. And
Well,
and
I'll even give an example
yeah.
from real life. So we had just moved here and the kids were at a park,
Mhm.
and met a friend and
Sweetest girl.
beautiful girl. And we were there like chatting, like, where are you gonna go to school? Where do you go to school? And the kids told her the school that they had gotten into, the charter school, and she was like, oh, I went there and I was bullied so bad I had to leave. And
Not
I
not laughing at that, but it was just like you're like you weren't expecting it,
no,
and she was serious. I mean, it
she's
was
like,
like,
now I go to a better school and it's fine, but that's a bad school.
yeah,
And I was like, oh no. Like we moved our family across the country and now they're sending them to this school where they're gonna get bullied. And it's like, oh, what have we done? That was like my initial internal dialogue. And I think just it's like important to recognize what happens in your body.
hmm
And for me, it's like I literally stop breathing. I don't breathe. And just having that recognition of like that story and
hmm
that like heart-stopping fear. You can see my fists, like like I'm bracing for something just because somebody told me like their story about
Well,
it.
and that's a great example because, right, if you're the parent of that, in this case, it was a young girl, and she was in that environment and was getting bullied, yeah, your anxiety or is gonna kick in. You're gonna go, hey, I need to respond to
This
this.
is unsafe.
Yeah, this is unsafe. So that is completely appropriate for that parent to go, wait, that happened, feel anxiety, deal with it, and then take action from there because it is happening. It's not like let's say it's true. Let's say it wasn't like, is she gonna get bullied? It's like, it's happening. Now, what's interesting about it is that then you could be someone that's completely outside that situation, has a completely different child, is going in a completely different time, is maybe not even going in the same class, maybe not even in the same building. And you hear that, and your body responds as if you were in the
Yeah.
situation, as opposed to that was that one child, that one family's experience that's true to them, and then they had to navigate that. But that does not automatically mean, like I said, good or bad, that that is going to be your experience. Like someone could say, oh, I went to that place and it was the best school ever and I loved it. And every day was like
Which
the Mary Poppins movie or something. and then you follow that of, okay, well, that obviously is going to be my end result. And then you move 50 miles, or you change jobs, or you commute 3 hours a day, only, only to go realize like, that isn't my experience. And then the other side is could be the same thing, right? It's like that's a bad place. You're gonna get bullied, things da 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 da. And then you go there, or one of your kid goes there and they love it, and the other one doesn't. Like, and so really, what the anxiety, the culture of parent anxiety that we are seeing, that we're experiencing, once again, it's around the physiological and the mental response to other people's stories as if it's inevitable or as if it's happening to you and your family. And that's where the stories are so powerful because we can line up, I could line up, and as a former educator, I can tell you this isn't true. You can line up 10 people and ask them about an experience in the exact same place. And you are going to get 10 variations on every story from the extreme of best place, best people ever, worst place, worst people ever, to, oh, this was great for this kid. It was not good for this one, on and on and on and on. They're just the stories of people's individual experiences. But our overculture, the binary culture, doesn't like that nuance. It wants it to be good,
This is a good
bad,
school. This is a
good
bad school.
school, bad school, private school bad, public school good, public school bad, private, on and on and on and on and on and on, in every variation you can think of. And so that's a great example. Now, mind you, in this case, it was a kid talking, which was even more hilarious because, they just let it fly. She's like, you're going to get hammered. Every day you're going to get beat up. And I'm like sitting there listening to this. And our kids are like looking at her and looking at me, looking at her. And I'm kind of like, we don't really know.
It was a great
It
conversation
was
with
a
our
great
kids after
conversation.
that
Yeah.
because they were like rightfully worried, right?
Yeah.
Like, are
Yeah.
we gonna get bullied? What's gonna
They're
happen?
like,
And
well, Sarah just told us real firsthand accounts of what could happen. Yeah.
I would say if I had that initial like
Yeah.
reaction, and then
Mm.
because of practice and tools was able to be like one one experience,
One
right?
person's
I
experience.
am
Yeah.
not being attacked by the tiger right now,
Yeah.
right? That was their experience. There are no tigers.
Yeah.
Everything is safe.
Yeah.
We are moving out of, we made this decision.
Mhm.
We researched it. It felt good for both of us, and we're going to keep moving forward with our families. So that was like this like one specific incident. We're able to also coach our kids through and say like, hey, this was her experience. Doesn't mean it's going to be your experience. And then I went and met I met another mom whose kids had gone to this
This is
school
like a couple days apart.
a couple days apart, and she was like, oh man, I met some of my best friends there. It was such a great school. Our kids loved it. She caveated like this was in this time period, right? I don't know how it is now because of course it's different year to year, child to child, experience to experience. But to know that like this person over here is like bullied, worst school ever. This person over here was like, wow, it was great. So like you were saying, as your experience as an educator, you had that happen. And then we had it happen in real life. And so just being able to catch the stories versus our actual experience that's like coming at us.
Yeah. Um, and so the reality is it is futile to try to stop the stories from coming in. You're not going to ask for these stories. You're going to literally be like, "Good morning, how's it going?" And someone may just offload like
A whole story.
a whole story of, and this story might be from an experience their kid at school 20 years ago. It might not even be, you might get people's stories who never even went to a school in the same state you're in.
Or just
Or
generational stories.
generational. It might be like your parents or your grandparents' stories of what you should be concerned about today. This is on and on and on. And so, can I get nerdy now just for one moment?
Go for it, baby.
Okay, so I love sci-fi. If you've read any of the Foundation books, if you haven't, you should. They're awesome. But there's also a series, I think it's on Apple TV, about Foundation. And there's a scene in the series where one of the emperors of the empire, he wears this bracelet, and this bracelet essentially it surrounds him with this very strong magnetic kind of shield that's invisible. And one of the people in the Empire's palace, she asks him, she says, like, well, if you, this thing, and it's always on, they never take it off. She says, well, how does anybody touch you? And he says, well, try. So, of course, in human nature, she tries to touch him, like kind of like touch him forcefully. And when she does, it activates the shield, shoots her back. And he says to her, he says, this shield responds to a certain kind of energy. And essentially, the energy he's talking about, if you come in forceful, anything that could be, that is like forceful or controlling or violent, it's going to activate the shield. But he says, if you go slow, if you're calm, and if you're gentle, the shield is able to recognize your energy and will let you through. And in terms of the stories that are going to come at you and always are going to come at you as parents, as multicultural parents, it is important to have some kind of shield where you're able to differentiate the energy of the person that's telling the story, their intentions behind it, and is this a calm, peaceful person that's trying to give me a nugget of wisdom? Or is this someone who's trying to take all of their fear, all of their anxiety, all of their experience and offload it onto me? And when you come into contact with that, you have to let it bounce. Because if you do that mental thing of like running their story in their mind as if it's happening in your kids, that will put you in a constant state of anxiety. Because, like I said, everyone from the barista at the coffee shop to the construction worker to your grandparents' best friend has a story on what school, what is good, what school is good for your kid. And so that is just a little bit of a sci-fi tool that is also awesome, and you should check it out.
And I think bringing it specifically to our multicultural family,
Mhm.
the school that might be the good school, may have a certain demographic that is not diverse. And that might not be good for your family because they will be the only. And in some regards, them maybe being the only child of a certain skin tone, if they are completely into it, it suits their needs, and they are thriving, could be great. For other kids, it could be completely detrimental and leave them feeling isolated and alone and like no one understands them and like they're the only one. So the story of school for a multicultural family is going to take more nuance
Yes.
and more consideration. And I'm even going to say this is a tool for a multicultural family, but it pan applies.
Yeah.
Because like most things, school is not going to solve all the problems, and it's not a one size fits all. In my conversation with one of the moms we were talking about, she had lived in many different places and had tried schools all over the country and was lamenting some of the choices or access and here in Savannah specifically. And I was like, well, I think that might be school everywhere. That there is no one size fits all. It's not perfect everywhere. It's not going to fit all of your child's needs no matter what. Like in some ways, school is sold to us as like a panacea where it's like this is the thing. Like if you find the right school, it's gonna be perfect and you never have to intervene, have hard conversations, go to parent meetings, support your child in different ways. Like school is, for us, we are looking at we are created priorities in terms of like what does our family need and what are our highest priorities in choosing a school environment.
Well, I think one of the best things a multicultural family and multicultural parents can do is go ahead and just kind of put it out there. Like, I don't expect any school to be all to be all the things.
Yeah.
Don't, I mean, you're kind of gaslighting yourself at that point. And you're also setting the school and staff, you're asking for this unreasonable expectation, So I think what you have to do is what we've chosen to do is say, okay, when we look at a school, what is the priority or what is the thing that we know it can't be everything? So what is the thing that we say, okay, we do want it to focus on this or these two things, you know? An example for me is when I walk into any school environment, I'm not necessarily looking at walls. I'm not really, I've done stuff with curriculum and things like that. I'm not even necessarily looking at that at this point in my journey. What I am is a major priority for me is I'm having conversations with the adults in that space because I want to pick up, are these lifelong learners? Are these adults who are like, hey, I'm still on my journey. I'm still growing. I still, outside of my job, I take classes in things that have nothing to do with school or even kids. I'm still always trying to develop as a human being. That for me is like at the top of my list because that kind of mindset, that kind of modeling trickles down to young people. So that if I walk into a place that everything is all good or looks good, but that's not happening, people are done. They're like, I'm done on my journey. Got my job. I do the same thing. I do the same thing every. That to me that is where I go, this isn't the zone. Now that might be now someone else, it might be, hey, I really need my kids to have access to a robust athletic program. Another person may be like, I really need my kid to have access to the diversity of arts and music and theater. Someone else, it might be STEAM. Someone else might be like, hey, my kid's a different kind of learner, so I need an environment that understands like a neurodivergent child or understands, can individualize things. None of those are good or none of those are good or bad, but to expect that a one place to do all of that, as someone who's worked in education, no matter what a school says, I'm telling you, no one place can do all that. So you have to say, okay, what is the thing that we value? And not that my parents value or my neighbor values or Sally at the playground values, but do we value for, and then what do we value for this child? In our case, we have three kids. Is it the value the same for all of them, or is it different? And by doing that, I think that then allows you as the multicultural kind of get very clear on what you do not expect from a school, what you're like, hey, if that never happens, we're good. And then what you are like, hey, this is really, really, really a cornerstone for us. And if it's not happening, can I be a support in helping you develop that? And if that place is not interested in that, then you have to be like, okay, now let's figure something out.
I think
Yeah.
it's important for us to share our story
Oh,
too,
sure.
just because I think examples are helpful.
Yeah.
I can't learn apart from examples and stories. Um, so for us in choosing the school that we did, both of us come from an education background and we're homeschooling our children on an academic level. So for us, we weren't really focused on test scores and is this school that have the highest test scores? Is it, putting out kids that have like crazy reading levels and math scores? That was not our highest like
Mm,
metric.
mm,
Sports weren't our highest metric. One of our highest metrics was, is this place, because we're also transitioning from a really small place to a larger place. Like, does this place focus on kindness? Is this place going to give our kids space to have emotions? So the school that we chose focused more on social emotional learning and creating a community and being a school within the community. And that right now is a high priority for us as we're transitioning our kids out of a smaller space, a smaller, just a smaller social network into a larger one. So for us, when we were looking at schools, thinking, okay, for us, high priority, like we know that we can support them with math and reading at home. Those are skills we both have, those are things we're comfortable doing. And also need support with that so that there is an outside source, right? So it's like I was clear I wasn't going to continue to keep homeschooling. That journey was done. So
mm.
I'm excited to have outside academics instruction and we can just support, and that there is this great social emotional community that is going to support our kids through this transition that feels smaller and more connected and really focuses on like what's the history of our community, how do we interact with our community, and building that,
Yeah.
as well as diversity, multiple skin tones. We came from more of a monoculture that was primarily Caucasian. And moving here, I wanted our kids to be exposed to all of the skin tones to say, like, yes, these exist. There are different ways of being, and for you to be comfortable, be able to be comfortable and find community in all the spaces.
Yeah.
So while we were making our decisions, that was some of our framework. Like Andre said, for some people, your framework might be like, we cannot provide academic support. So like that, like our number one and our kids' focus is this. And guess what? For us, it might change. We might go there for a year and be like, oh wow, that really fit for two of them, but not for one of them, or that fit for one of them, but not for two of them. And then we make a decision from our actual experience, not the perceived fear or stories from other people.
Well, we've had an interesting journey, because kind of giving a little background, I worked for 10 years and I was a special education instructor. And I actually, my professional background in education started at junior college level. And then I went down to a high school level and I actually ended at elementary level, kind of running the day-to-day operations of a small school site. And then COVID happened and we, navigated that as a school, a school coordinator, school lead, which was, dynamic for everyone across the country. And then at the end of all that, 2021, then there was California, in Northern California, the big Dixie Fire. And as a result of the Dixie Fire, the actual physical building that I had was working at, that building burned down. And that was the school that our kids were attending. And so our even decision to homeschool, it came about, once again, going back to your individual circumstance. We had a very unusual, it wasn't like we woke up and we're like,
let's homeschool.
We're like, okay, COVID, okay, that's over, we're going. And then the building burned down. And then as a result of that, people move, people relocate, and then that program was no longer was no longer a viable program, and that elementary program actually dissolved. It dissolved, and due to this unforeseen, disaster. So that's what led us into the homeschool element, because we felt at that time, given our options, given what we felt our kids needed, that was the best option.
And even for us at the time, because to access different options meant a long commute.
Yeah. And so that, I think, given a little bit of backstory, and then what I can also say is someone that's worked from the junior college level all the way down to kindergarten, and especially being in the context of a special education teacher, where one of your main goals is to figure out who kids are individually, because you already know whatever is like in a box that's scripted, that's probably not going to work for them. You're going to have to change it or modify it or present it in a different way. And what I saw continually in my experience in school was the thing that had the biggest impact on students, but was the well-being and the health and the mindset and the play and I guess I would say the social emotional place of the adults in the space. When the adults were well and healthy and vibrant and taking in new information and engaged in the world and not burnt out and tired, kids thrived. It didn't matter what the school was. It didn't matter what the curriculum used. It didn't matter if it was an outdoor school, a Waldorf school, a private school. When you had a culture of adults like really showing up for themselves and putting that as a number one priority, kids will. And then the opposite was also true. When adults stop taking care of themselves, when they stop growing, when they get burnt out, when they got tired, when they stopped putting that as a part of their lived experience, that had a massive negative impact on the mental, social, and academic well-being of kids. So that's why we're taking all of this, and that's what frames our kind of like hierarchy of what we're looking for. Now, once again, your lived experience and your family experience and who you are as individuals, you might come up with the same, or you might come up with something completely different, and that is okay. What you come up with is probably what is best for you. What I recommend you avoid is taking on the stories and the anxiety of other people and then trying to do that reverse engineering thing. I heard this terrible thing happen. Already talked about this terrible thing. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to try to make a bunch of decisions here to engineer the outcome that doesn't happen. Versus going, hold on, what is true for us? What do we know about our children? And using that to then allow an outcome to come into place. Because to avoid that story, you might many parents to avoid another parent's story, I think end up making decisions that actually in the long run end up potentially hurting themselves, their marriage or their partnership, and their kids.
Well, it's reactive versus
Yeah.
proactive too, to say, well, I don't want that versus what do I want?
Yes.
And I think this moment in time is a very reactive moment in
Mhm.
time where we see something and we're like, not that. And that's like the fear, right? That's that in breath where I'm like, that's the anxiety, right? Versus one of the antidotes to anxiety is creativity. And this process is a creative one. And Andre and I, over the years that we've been together, also have unpacked our own stories about
Oh yeah.
school, our family stories about school. And so the when we made a decision about sending our children to a school here in Savannah and what we were looking for, that conversation had been going on for years because we identified or had been having these conversations for years that like in my overculture family culture like school was the most important thing and to be academically successful and what school meant as an impact on your life and what it meant about you was a whole big long story. And Andre had a story as well from his background. And so those over cultures, individual and family stories about school, all those play in. And if you don't hit the pause button and kind of look up and be like, wow, like what was my relationship to school? What was my family's focus on school? What did my culture tell me? And
Yeah.
just pause it and have that conversation to identify it. So it's like out here.
Well, I mean, yeah, and when you do that, I mean, I even recently, realized the massive impact, Jamaica is a Commonwealth of England, and that is where, my mom and my uncles, my family, that's where they were educated. And that is a very specific system.
Yeah.
And so realizing that culturally, that had a massive impact on if you come out of those type of island situations, what you view as a good school. Well, it is influenced by what was put in place to you based on the English system. And
Yeah.
so that's your context for what education is or is good or is bad. And we don't even realize that. Now, well, actually, I did attend. There is a picture of me in all brown
So
outfit,
cute.
wool socks in a place that is 95% humidity and hot. So that's a different conversation. But yeah, so
Thanks, Queen.
thanks, Queen. Sorry. Every time that picture of like, who does that? But now, but I was not educated all the way up through in the Caribbean context. So even though it wasn't my experience, that cultural experience, it still will impact me because I grew up with all the stories. I grew up with the stories of what happens when you pass that exam and you matriculate up and you get in to the high school levels because it's not automatic. Like, what did that mean for the family? What did that mean for your little street? I mean, people would say, like, hey, on this street, half the kids on this street got into this private school, got into this, like, and that meant something. And so you grow up with these stories
Like a
and they
story.
influence even if you never said, wait, I think that it's it's still
Yeah.
in there until you go, wait, what are you doing in here? That's not that is that's from that's a story of a place and a time in 1960 and an island that is not right here right now. And so this is what we mean when you pull it back. you start to, and the stories are not always from the outside. They're from the outside, but they might not be necessarily even in the present. It might be the stories from your family have been telling from the past, but all of it's landing right here, right now. And if you try to make decisions based on all those stories, that is going to result in a high level of anxiety because there's no way you can get clarity and you can move from a place of integrity when you are operating and trying to solve for all those stories. Um, and so that is what I believe is resulting in the an overwhelming amount of parent anxiety or culture of anxiety with regards to parents in school. And then that absolutely impacts our kids. And that's a different topic, but we know that kids are at a at a time right now when it comes to anxiety and very, very young kids, they're experiencing extreme levels. My hypothesis is that we're actually transmitting our parenting anxiety onto them. Energy is never created or destroyed, it's transferred. And so I think if we look at the anxiety level of kids, that's one way to look at it. Or you go, okay, wait a minute, where is that really coming from? Is it always social media or is it dad or mom or household? And because we're wearing this anxiety when we don't stop and go, hold on.
And we're giving
Yeah.
our own stories to our kids,
Yeah.
and some of them positive, some of them negative. I do think it's important to check them.
Mhm.
And like we're talking about with anxiety around schools, like we're saying, so there is things that are actually happening
Yes.
in the present, and to say, okay, wow, this is happening, we need
Let's
to address
respond to
it
that.
versus the story. And I think it is so important to take a minute
Yeah.
and identify that story. What was the level of education in my household? What did going to college or not going to college mean about me? What did getting good grades or not getting good grades mean? What was the focus on going this delivery man? Get this every time.
He's delivering songs.
No, cabbage.
Yep.
We're gonna pause. Walk away.
No, no, commercial break.
Calm down. I we're back. So I was talking about this, recognizing the stories that we are checking those stories that we're given, and recognizing is like what I grew up with, and also your own experience of school. Was it negative and you didn't like it, or did you absolutely love it and you loved everything about it? And so identifying those as like kind of the first step in terms of reducing anxiety around it. If you can't see what you're coming in with, then you can't like kind of launch from there.
Yeah, I mean, that first tool is like, am I responding or am I being anxious about something that is happening or or has happened, like is a circumstance, like it happened. Or am I responding to others, people's stories, or even my own stories about what could happen? And it could be good or bad.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Mhm.
Responding to the event, responding to the thing that happened, responding to that circumstance, that's showing up. That's called being engaged. That's awesome. That's your anxiety saying, hey, there's something that needs our attention. That's good. We take that. Responding to potential stories, my own, others about what could happen, what may happen, what's going to be good in the future, bad in the future. That anxiety, that is the ones we want to catch because that's going to put you in that anxiety parenting loop around school and other things. But for the sake of this conversation, around school and the major role it has or doesn't have within the lives of your children. And so catching that, just making that discernment. I'm feeling that anxiety. Wait, did this happen? Is it happening? Yes, okay. Now let's pay attention to it. Or no, that's just a story. That's all an imagine. That's someone else's experience, or that's just imagination. Okay, I'm gonna put that down.
And I think it's really helpful to just take a moment
Hmm.
maybe 20 minutes with your partner and just have this conversation.
Yes.
Actually, usually probably a
Yeah.
long conversation about
Yeah.
what your experience was so that in the moment you have pre-identified the story. Because
Yes.
I think it's hard to catch it in the moment if you haven't like in a calm space been like, wow, this was my experience. Whoa, this is how it shaped me.
Mm,
And just have a calm, reflective conversation with your partner about like
mm,
what was school like for you? What did it mean for like what did it mean to you in the moment? Did you like it? Was it positive? Was it negative in your little human body?
mm,
And moving forward. And what did your culture say about it?
mm,
Right? Was it important? Was it not? So having this like really calm, identifying conversation
mm,
with your partner to
mm,
be able to say like, okay, this was my experience with school. And from that place, then like what do we want to
mm.
create and what is our value around school and education and like what world do we want that physical building or for us to create like what do we want it to fill.
Mm.
And I would choose like one or two top priorities because like Andre's saying it's not school can't be everything for everyone, and so choose a couple things. For us it was like social emotional learning, community
Culture.
connection, culture,
Mm,
right? Few things that were like these are our top priorities at this moment. And then like Andre's saying like top tier is in the moment of feeling that anxiety, you're able to come back to, oh, that was a story. I don't need to address it. Or, oh,
that's
this
happening.
isn't aligning with our values. And so we're going to address it in
Mm,
real time.
yeah. And so there's that one. And then the second one I would say is, be very mindful of the cultural landscape right now is that anxiety is bad and we should all be working to, get rid of it or somehow manage it or somehow separate our human experience from it. And there's wisdom in that. Yes, anxiety can, at a certain level, it can be detrimental, it can be disabling, it can be very harmful.
The stories.
However, in this conversation, this context, we are not asking you to not be anxious. We're not asking you to not feel anxiety as a human being. We're not as a parent. I think I've talked to our kids of like, hey, there are things that might make me anxious now that if you talk to 20-year-old me, wasn't even in my mind, my wasn't even in my universe. But then once you were born, all of a sudden there was a whole other. So we're not asking you to like not feel any anxiety as a parent or as a human being. What I am suggesting is that when that feeling comes up, however that feels for you, whether it's in your head, whether it's in your body, however that feels for you, I'm just asking you to consider to recognize it, ask those questions. Hey, are you here because something has happened, is happening, or are you here because of a story? And then instead of trying to get rid of it, just kind of take notice of it. And when I mean notice it, really notice like where do you feel it? What's the texture? Does it have a color? Do you have physical response? Do you get colder? Do you get hotter? And the reason why I'm encouraging parents to do this is because the more you can recognize those physiological signs, as they arise after a specific story, the more you're then going to be able to go, oh, those are the stories that trigger anxiety. Those are the people. Those are the settings. Those are all and then what you will eventually realize with practice is you'll be able to catch those things. And you'll be able to kind of disassociate of like, oh, that's not me. That's that stuff. And that stuff can bring up anxiety when I let it in as my own. And so you're also able to start to then say, oh, that's not mine. That's not mine. That hasn't been my experience. This has been. And that creates, and I think when I say that there can be wisdom in anxiety, in the experience of anxiety, I think it's that kind of wisdom. It's not the immediate wisdom of knowing what to do. It's when you use it as a teacher to help you not to help you learn how your body responds to certain things over time, then you can kind of it does have a wisdom in it, and that you start to kind of, before it happens, you almost kind of things go in slow motion. You start to be like, you start to see it and go, oh, this is what's happening right now. And you know what? I'm good.
And I
Yeah.
would you say too, because I don't enjoy that experience of anxiety, but for me, catching the stories reduces unnecessary anxiety. Because
Uh,
my fear and worry and holding about the thing that hasn't happened yet,
mm,
may never happen,
mm,
like that is not anxiety that I think is useful or that I want to hold on to.
mm. Well, I don't think you hold on to it. I think you notice it. It's like what I would say is like imagine if you grabbed a hot pan, you're gonna know you're like, oh, there's a oh, but you're not gonna hold on to it. You're gonna let it go. But then after you let it go, your body then starts to know that's the sensation that I feel that lets me know this is hot. This can hurt you. But if you were just to ignore, and there are some people that don't get those sensations. They don't feel pain. They don't feel though, and they end up getting really, really injured throughout their life because they don't get those warnings or those feelings that are very uncomfortable, that don't feel good in our bodies, but it's protecting us from something even worse. And so I don't think you hold it, but I think when somebody tells you a story and that makes you anxious, or you go, I think it's then taking notice of like, oh, this is what it feels like. This is what my anxiety feels like. This is the texture it has. This is where it shows up. So that it's like the hot pan. Then you're like, like someone starts to go down that line of story, and you already are like, oh yeah,
But wouldn't you
this
say
pan's
that
hot.
catching stories too, you recognize that the pan's hot, so
Mm,
you stop picking it up
mhm.
so that you do reduce unnecessary anxiety.
Yeah. Oh, and oftentimes we still pick up hot pans, but we don't do it with our bare hands. Right? We'll put a mitten on. And like we can go, this analogy is kind of going too far, but like essentially we take protective measures, right? Like that's what I mean. Is like the human experience is going to have some element of anxiety if you're living in it, if you're experiencing new things, if you're moving to new places, if you're doing different, but it's one thing to go in barehanded and just not be aware of the things that cause you anxiety versus, you know what, like you're like, yeah, no, I can't control all these elements. There's going to be some stuff here that's going to trigger that parent anxious mind. But once again, I'm going to use a protective measure of making sure I find joy. I'm going to use a protective measure of taking care of my body. I'm going to use a protection measure of talking to my partner. I'm going to use a protection measure of catching my story so that pan might still be hot, but it's not burning because I have this thing. I've wisdom now to know, oh, that pan's probably hot. I'm going to put on something that protects me. I have no idea if any of that is gonna land because I tried to weave it all together, but it just made me really hungry.
Oh,
So
frying pan.
because and the reason why I'm really kind of focusing on this is because I think once again going back to the binary, right? We can get to a point where we're like that feeling is bad. Therefore, feeling anxiety is bad. Therefore, if when I feel anxiety or anxiousness, that's bad. I don't, or good people don't feel that, and I don't want to feel that, so I'm not going to feel that. Versus going, you know what? Anxiety might not be good or bad. It might just be a feeling that is a response to something. Sometimes it's something that's actually happened, and sometimes it's something that has not happened, but is a story and I'm feeling anxious about. And just being able to but then being able to like let it come up and then kind of go, okay, what are you trying to tell me here? And then kind of go, oh, you're just on automatic. You're on autopilot. You're just responding to stories versus like, oh no, this thing actually needs some attention. Like this is an actual concern. And
Yeah,
my
that's
anxiety is allowing me not to just be like, oh, it's all good. He's fine. They're fine.
like
I
I
don't need to intervene.
right when you
I think that is because some of the wisdom anxiety, it's not going to let you just be like, I guess I'll go back and watch the soccer game. It's like, you're like, no, I can't stop thinking about it because, oh yeah, I need to show up there. This is happening. My kid is being bullied, or my daughter is, in an unsafe environment. Yeah, I need to go. So I think that's the downside if you just don't feel it. When it actually has wisdom and guidance, you're checked out. And we know stories of kids and people and individuals that have been in situation for years and years and years, and the people around them didn't catch it. They weren't paying attention. They weren't anxious. They were so removed from that it didn't come up. Versus, oh, it's just always firing and unnecessarily.
I
And so
see
there's
the
that's its nuance, and it's not as clean as good or bad. And it's also not as clean as like, let it run wild and manage it. It really takes, I think, that subtleness of like, can I allow myself, again, myself permission to fully engage in the human experience? And joy is a part of the human experience. Anxiety is a part of the human experience. So not good or bad. If you have a human body and if you're engaged and if you're living, this is going to be something
I see
that
what you're
touch.
saying more now in terms of it being like an indicator and protection versus not, is that if the like opposite response is like this is bad and I want it to go away.
Mhm,
And so I just make it go away
mhm, mhm,
versus I am I am experiencing that and then identifying if it's real or a story
mhm, mhm,
because the real stuff matters. And I think that is so true because
mhm.
definitely in my own life, the one of the tools I was given was just to shut it all down. And you do end up shutting off things that might actually not be safe.
Yeah, and we call it anxiety. That's our label for it. But like these feelings they're old. They're not, they didn't just come into being with me or you. I mean, there is knowledge and there is wisdom in a lot of these feelings that are very uncomfortable and we don't like the way they feel in our body, but they didn't just pop up. They had a purpose. They had a reason. And yeah, it's a little bit challenging now because their purpose and the reason that, they were there for not necessarily our everyday environment, but that doesn't mean that these things haven't allowed, as it hasn't protected us and guided us and allowed us to flee, literally flee from situations that were like, you know what? No, we can't stay here anymore. We need to get to freedom. And so that is where I think as parents, we can use that as a tool of wisdom. Now, do you want to make decisions and take actions no, but that might lead you to the thing that says, okay, we need to sit down, we need to get calm, we need to talk about this, and we do need to take an action, not in an anxious state, but the anxiety got us to this table. It got us to this kitchen table to have this hard conversation about this thing that's very uncomfortable so that we can then use the wisdom and move forward. And that's very different than I'm going to go over there because someone told me that's good, or I'm going to run away from this because someone told me that's bad. Those are two very different ways of moving through your parenting experience. So that's what we got.
Anxiety, part one.
Yeah. So that's part one, school. And so once again, the reason why we're breaking these into themes is because we want to let you know you're not crazy. We are not crazy. There are things that are embedded in our culture. There are things that are embedded in the parent culture. And I mean, Jessica, we're talking about, I was like, some of these things that we're going to talk about, school and anxiety, they've been causing people anxiety for,
A long time.
a long, long time before you were a parent, before I was a parent. They were causing our parents anxiety. So the reality is these are cultural things that we have just accepted as normal. And we want to bring to light that, like, we can't, they're there, but we can choose to interact with them in a very different way that doesn't lead to a culture of anxiety with parents that then gets transferred down to our kids and the people that we love the most. So don't bark at the mailman.
She wants to do it. Still on my foot.
So next week's topic, money. Ooh,
I wasn't actually ready for that. I wasn't sure what you were gonna say.
talk about money,
Anxiety.
anxiety, parenting, money, anxiety.
I have a lot of thoughts about that one and a lot of stories to share.
Be good. So we're excited to be on this journey with you guys, with all of you. And we are excited for our community to open up because we
July 20th, go to Multicultural Family Hub /kickoff.
yes.
and you can register there. And if you register and come to our super fun kickoff
Mhm.
on July 20th, you get a free month in our community.
Yes.
So you can
Yeah.
try it out. And we're just so excited to actually be launching this thing.
Yeah. And the kickoff's going to include like little samples, little snippets, a little smorgasbord of
Oh.
some of, oh, you like that word? Of some of the things that we're going to just not be offering the community, some of the tools we're going to share, and just some of the things that we've used on our journey here. But then we're also excited within that community, we are then going to be able to take much deeper dives into some of the stuff that we touch on in our podcast and some of the stuff that we touch on just within conversations, but to real that we think that we know we're all going through it. You're in it together, you're in it in a community, and that, yeah, we
And
got
the
you.
magic is you.
Yes.
Like, we really want you to be there because what you have to offer is so valuable. And the magic is in the connection and seeing that we're not all alone doing this and all of the awesome things that you have to bring. So, we really want you to show up there because that is what's going to make this super successful. So, we're asking, please come to the kickoff because we want to be together with you.
Yeah. All right. Till next time. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.